Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Beyond the Bikini Radio. I'm very excited for today's guest. His name is Dave Tilley. Welcome.
Hello, Nicole. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
I'm very excited to bring you on because I've been following your page, Shift Movement Science, all about gymnastics and prevention when it comes to injuries, and also a lot about mental health. And I think that your message is so important. So I want to get it out there. I know that my audience knows I'm a huge gymnastics fan, but tell us a little bit more about you, Dave. What got you into the sport of gymnastics and even coaching, and then making that transition to pursue PT?
Yeah, first, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate you following. I appreciate the community that Shift has built. But yeah, I grew up in gymnastics, pretty classic, like everybody else. I had too much energy, and my mom was like, "Get this kid out of here." So we joined a local preschool gym, became competition, became, growing up, I wanted to do something in college gymnastics because the men's college gymnastics community is very close knit, and it's very, very cool. It's like a very unique kind of sport to be in. So I ended up doing Division III college at Springfield College. And yeah, just through my career, whether it was coaching, I started coaching when I was 15, and I got injured a lot, and I had a lot of training issues. I had an amazing coach. My gym was phenomenal. I got really lucky that they really cared about us quite a bit, and it was hard, but it was never, over the line, and my coach was amazing. So yeah, just through training hard and through gymnastics is tough. I had injuries, and I always wanted to be involved somehow in the sport. And I also really wanted to stay involved with coaching. But I also kind of had a flair for like sports science and medical stuff. And I, was interested in how that all worked. So yeah, I had a lot of different thoughts, and I thought about maybe I'll be an orthopedic surgeon first. So I went that route a little bit, and I was like, oh, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of time. I don't get to spend a lot of time with people. So I audibled and I applied to the physical therapy program at Springfield. I actually got rejected the first and second time, but the third time got in, which was sweet. I transferred in. And then, yeah, I did gymnastics at Springfield, and I was coaching during the summers. I was doing camps and traveling and, developing stuff for physical therapy. And it was just all it just made sense to me. Like I am like the biggest nerd ever when it comes to terms to like learning. I'm always trying to learn something. I enjoy reading books. I enjoy trying to learn courses and stuff. So it felt like it was a career that you could endlessly keep learning stuff, which was really cool. But then it also gave me a unique perspective because obviously being an athlete and being someone who coaches, then also as I graduated and finished my doctoral work, being someone who could provide a medical lens, those three things together were like, this seems really unique. Like I don't know a lot of people who were a college gymnast and are still actively coaching and are still actively treating gymnasts every day. So it was a lot of work, but the last 8 years, up until last May, I took a step back from coaching because Shift is taking on some really important projects, and I kind of have to put my eggs in that basket. I was doing all three. I was coaching, and I was treating, and I was doing research stuff, and then also Shift started in 2014. So it's been a fun ride. It's I never in a million years thought that it would get to what it is now, which is somehow like an international large fan base with a lot of courses, a lot of consulting work, a lot of research work. And I'm super grateful for that. But yeah, that's kind of my day-to-day operations is stuff like this, talking to podcasts. And then I have 12 hours of everything to do after this. So it's fun though. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, there's so much to learn with like physical therapy, and also the sport that you're in is always changing on a constant basis.
Particularly now.
Yeah, particularly now. And there's a lot of things too, just like with the mechanics of gymnastics that doesn't necessarily make sense. Like, why do we have this like as a rule when it's not safe? But it looks pretty. So like that's their like justification. Oddly enough, I originally started out with school, like going the physical therapy route, and then I switched it to exercise science because I'm like, I don't think I want to work with people who have injuries. I want to be healthy.
Yeah, totally.
But they do work, hand in hand there. So when you kind of got to mend the two, what were some issues that you saw in the gymnastic space with, injury prevention?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that the way it all came together is I got out of school in 2013, and I kind of was deep in the well of coaching world because I was still a gymnastics coach, tried and true. Like I was going to congresses and meetings and clinics and all that, the same stuff you would do for coaching. So I kind of had that half of my life. But then also, I'm so lucky that 2 years after I graduated, I got a job at Champion Physical Therapy where I work now, which is kind of like one of the world, leading expert spots for sports medicine, sports performance. My bosses both worked in professional baseball for a long time. My boss is the medical director for the White Sox right now. So we had so many professional baseball players. We also have tons of, really high level Division I track and field athletes, weightlifters, baseball, softball, so many different types of things that I had never gotten exposed to with that side of the world. I was treating those athletes, but I was never in a sports performance facility to try to help them. So I kind of have on one part of my life, I am seeing the tried and true gymnastic stuff. On another part of my life, I'm seeing the traditional medical sports medicine, sports performance model. And then I also have a lot of friends that were really high level collegiate gymnast or national team gymnast that got into CrossFit. And so I was kind of dabbling in the CrossFit space a little bit too, helping these people treating it. And there's a camp called Power Monkey Camp in Tennessee, which is like a whole bunch of experts from that field, weightlifters, running experts, endurance experts. And so I kind of had just getting fire hose with information for like 2 years of my own studies from books and courses, Power Monkey stuff, and then also the model. So I kind of just had all this stuff dumped onto me. And what I found very quickly is there's a couple things that in gymnastics you scratch your head at just a little bit. So one of which being was the lack of evidence-based strength and conditioning models. So the fact that, gymnasts are still, even to this day, it's so much better now. But 5 years ago, even 8 years ago, when I was like, guys, I think we should try to do some weight training, they were like, you're an idiot. You know what I mean? Like I got like really like pinned to the wall by a lot of high level coaches saying that what I was saying was stupid. I had no idea what I was talking about. And I just, I was like, well, I believe in science and I believe in these people who have lots of experience in professional sports and college sports. And I don't think we should copy paste, Alabama's football program, but I think we should probably entertain the idea. And so back then it was very much like, not only was it you're wrong, you're actually detracting from the talent and the ability of the athletes. So don't say this. And then as every year went by, more science comes out, you talk to more people, you get on more podcasts, I had to develop my ideas quite a bit because I was very wrong in the beginning about what I thought was helpful. But now we're at a point, flash forward eight years later, where last Wednesday, I gave a 2-part lecture to every college gymnastics coach on weight training for gymnasts and why it's important to use a hybrid model. And we have 20 college gymnasts that come to our facility every summer. We have people that live with us all summer. We have 12-year-old gymnasts who are lifting and also training level 9, level 10. And so we're seeing a very good, transmutation of this is crazy, we should never do it, to, okay, how does this fit in our lifestyle and our culture? Because I do believe traditional body weight gymnastics, strength, and traditional methods are crucial and they're very, very important. But I know a lot of national teams and a lot of elite teams now that are lifting 1 to 2 days per week in their off season, and they're seeing phenomenally large increases in their performance and also reductions in their injury. And I mean, that's the second big thing I noticed was gymnastics is very stoic in their culture and also kind of very stubborn. So when you see research and data reflect the injury rates, it's not accurate, right? It's not accurate at all, because the things that you can't not fake, you roll your ankle, you break your knee, you tear your meniscus, you see those things. They're obvious. You tear your ACL, it's very obvious. But if you have chronic low back pain or wrist pain or knee pain, most gymnasts are just going to suffer in silence because they want to be hardcore and they want to keep training, and it's not healthy, but it's very much what the culture was 10 years ago and sometimes still is here. So I noticed a lot of research that I was reading. I was like, God dang, these like injury rates are huge. These are massive, right? And I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, they're wrong. They're super underreported. So that was the other large thing that I see, and it's still an uphill battle we're trying to figure out, is what are the modifiable factors for how we can reduce the risk of injury into gymnastics. And one of those is strength training. One of the best evidence-based ways to reduce the risk of injury, not the rate of injury, is to have really good, robust strength conditioning programs and really good planning training programs. So it also uncovered a lot of other cultural things, nutrition things, early specialization things that are much bigger balls of wax. It kind of opens Pandora's box. But in the effort to help people, the earliest I attacked strength and conditioning and performance-based metrics, because people were like, oh, that makes sense, how that could help a little bit. And then as I build trust with people and rapport with people, I'm like, hey, well, what about the way they land? Or like, well, what about maybe, some of the things we're asking them to do when they're 12 years old? We just dabble in that conversation as the relationship grows a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like when I was growing up and I had coaches and we would do our conditioning, they'd always like drop these little like sprinkles of like, oh, like you don't want to lift too heavy because you don't want to get too big. Or they would say you don't want your muscles to be bulky, you want them to be long and lean. And
Yeah.
now I look back thinking like that doesn't make any sense at all. And I was an athlete where I wasn't super strong with just the body weight conditioning. I needed to be lifting weights. I needed that in order to put on the muscle. And you do have some athletes who are able to put on great amounts of muscle mass, considering the fact that they're only basically doing body weight movements. But
Mhm.
that's not the case for everyone. And when we're looking at like injury prevention, a lot of gymnastics is the body weight movement, lots of flexibility. And then a lot of these girls are still missing that stability with their strength and building that muscle. So then they're kind of being set up for these injuries. So I really wish that gyms, and it is getting better now, but I hope that they start to incorporate some sort of weight training program or at least have it in the gym. Because even when I was in high school, all the other kids were going to the weight training room. We never got to go in there. Like my first time going into a weight training room was by myself at like a rec center. And I was very intimidated. Yeah, I was very intimidated. I didn't know what to do. And it's really unfortunate because I feel like the coaches should have taken you in there. But the problem is it was passed down to them. So they
Yeah.
didn't even know how to teach us.
Yeah, and this really does. It's a perfect segue. You led the question is the other massive thing next to strength and conditioning and kind of the injury situation. The other like huge thing that can help reduce injury risk, but also is fundamentally needs to change is the educational model, particularly in the US of how coaches are, certified and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if you ever did coach in gymnastics or how your coach did, but my coaching education was I was 15. I wanted to learn and help and I wanted to make some extra money. So I started just shadowing my coach and I started shadowing the other people in our gym about preschool classes. And I would watch how they made circuits and I would take their drills and take their strength stuff. And I just did whatever they did because it worked. Right. And while I think that mentorship aspect is crucial, what I didn't get was an educational curriculum on this is how you run a class. This is the basic safety. I had like the basic U100 course from gymnastics and stuff, but that was a safety check and a box check. That wasn't teaching me how to run a class effectively. So I think the other thing that if we want to see sustainable culture changes in gymnastics, but also a lot of positive enforcement of really good things. 90% of the coaches out there, 95% of the coaches are amazing people who are working so hard and they just want to be happy themselves and they just want to provide a really good experience for the athletes, right? And what happens, unfortunately, is you get these young coaches who are super fired up and they're super excited, and then they get like the worst possible on ramping for either their education, their academic work, or their mentorship work. They say like, well, here's a U100 course. Here are some books to look at. Here are some courses, and you'll shadow me for a couple months, and then you'll take your own class. And a lot of those coaches feel, extremely stressed out when they try to run a class, whether it's a preschool class or a teen class, and they really don't have a lot of like training wheels to get really up to date and feel comfortable. And then those people are not paid well, right? They're typically the lowest on the
No.
totem pole and they're paid terribly. So they're not going to put their own money into buying a book and going to a course. So for me personally, I think there's three pillars that I see that have to change in order for gymnastics to make a sustainable future. One is we can talk about this later, but one is like a standard moral and ethical set of rules and guidelines that everybody must be abiding to, agreeing on, and held to, right? Whether it's through Safe Sport, whether it's through the NGBs, whatever, we need that to happen. That's like nowhere where we move forward if we don't have that first. The second thing we need is a very specific way to look at like monitoring and wellness and, workloads and all that. That's like strength conditioning goes in there, periodization goes in there. That's like the nerdy bucket. That is not the role of the average coach to do. That's for people like myself, my research partner, Ellen Casey, the geeks of the world who love that stuff. It's our job to do research, take that and translate that into, okay, what do I do practically with that? Which is what I tried to do with that lecture last week with the college gymnasts and the college coaches is here's what I've learned. Here's the geeky stuff. Here's what it means for you. Here's the exercises that are helpful, right? That's the second pillar. The third pillar is overhauling the educational model. Many other places around the world they're good at this. Like the FIG has levels of coursework and it's academically good. But I think what we need to do is mirror the medical model, right? So when I was in doctoral school for my last rotations, I had 2 years of clinical work, 4 semesters where I took tests, I proved I knew the information, I would have mock clinicals to make sure I wasn't going to kill anybody. I learned academically half the time and I practiced clinically half the time, right? And that gave me the base of knowledge then in my third year to go out in the world and work at a clinic for 12 weeks and apply that information, learn, get feedback, learn the soft skills of talking to patients, right? And so that's what we need in the gymnastics world. And this is a hill I'll absolutely die on. And I probably will spend a large chunk of my career trying to build this with the first organization who pulls the trigger and wants to do it. But you need to have, okay, I want to be a gymnastics coach. So you need to have, let's say, a minimum 6 months of academic coursework that we all agree on as experts, quote unquote, myself and 500 other people that maybe are valuable, coaches to medical providers to strength coaches. Here's the basic minimal thing you need to learn about child development, mental health, nutrition. You don't need to be a nutritionist or a sports psychologist, but you have to have a basic understanding of what sport is going to do to an athlete who's growing and going through puberty. So we also teach you about where your hands go on a cartwheel. We teach you about, how to do all this stuff. So it's academic work. And then alongside that, during that 6 months, you go shadow and you spend time with the people who we believe in the community are good moral humans, but are successful in their field. They've produced healthy, happy athletes multiple years in a row. So we do that for 6 to 8 months maybe, and that's paid for half as an investment of the person trying to get into it. As if I went to school, I took out loans, but also maybe the gym pays for half, or the NGB waives some of the fees. If there's a contract, like, okay, we'll pay for you if you work here for a year after you get your cert, right? And you can get the money back as a business owner. So I think that's the minimum we need for an entry to start here in the US or worldwide. And then there's an advanced level 2, quote unquote, which is, okay, I want to work with optional gymnastics. I want to work in elite gymnastics. I want to work in college gymnastics. That's like a whole nother level of physiology you got to learn, mental health, sports performance, technique. So there's another year of academic work. And then now you go find the Amy Bormans of the world, or, the Tom Meadows of the world, who are those really legendary coaches. And you dedicate a year of your life to learning and studying under them. And then you take a test. You take a test to get into the, baseline level of, tell me the things on this multiple choice or whatever that are how you set drills up, and then conduct a mock class in front of us. And let us know what you would do. And then same thing with the next level, which is, okay, take another test and make sure you're legit for that. And then also, here are 8 optional level athletes that are level 8. Create a bar workout for them, create a strength and conditioning program for them. And we'll work you through that and we'll help you. But it's a long answer, but that's something that I firmly believe, until we get the moral contracting stuff, we get the strength conditioning all figured out, the workloads, and we get this, it's never going to change. We're going to keep running into the same frustrating headaches that we've always had.
Yeah, communication is such a big thing too. And I like that you touched upon that. Is a lot of coaches don't know how to communicate with younger athletes, or they look at them like little adults, and they are not little adults. Some of them are incredibly gifted. So yeah, their skill level is at the level of an adult, but a 10-year-old's a 10-year-old. And we have to learn how to communicate that information to them, and make the education and make the resistance training and their bar work and their stretching, like we have to make that all still fun for them, or else they're going to quit. Gymnastics has a huge turnover rate as they go up in the levels, because I think that coaches forget that this is still a sport, it's still for fun, and there's still a lot of coaches out there that they only want to do this for people that want to win, and it's a very extreme mindset. We have to be realistic. Not everybody wants to be a D1 level athlete. Not everybody wants to go to the Olympics. Some people just want to do this because they enjoy doing it. And we have to learn how to meet the athletes and where they're at.
Yeah, it's so well said. And I think 2 points back to your communication piece is, I think that we also have to have a lot of empathy for the coaches in this situation, and also the parents in this situation. Is most coaches and parents just want to see their kids be happy, healthy, and enjoy the sport they want to do. So when you have an 8-year-old, like you said, whether that's an 8-year-old who literally starts gymnastics for the first class ever and they're never going to compete, they just want to do once per week recreation because they like jumping in the foam pit, right? That 8-year-old, it's just as important for that 8-year-old to be, served well, I guess, have a good experience, as the 8-year-old who is literally the next Simone Biles, Michaela Skinner, Jade Carey, right? To farm that talent and get them there. But if you don't have communication, that child has no idea what is happening in their life. They do gymnastics because it's fun and they see their friends, and it's exciting for them. Parents and medical providers and coaches need phenomenal communication skills to make sure that what is done every moment is in the child's best interest, and for many things, health being the priority. But if you don't have, and I learned this the hard way, this was a huge mistake that I made, was that I did not have my own personal life figured out and sorted about, my own outside the world of gymnastics self-esteem and stuff. And so gymnastics coaching became a way for me to feel good about myself, because if the kids were doing well and competing well and the kids were, moving up in level, I felt like a good coach, aka a good person. I was meaningfully doing something. And if it didn't work and it was tanking, I would get upset and I would get frustrated. That's what a lot of coaches go through. So if you don't take the time to deal with your own crap first, and then you don't develop the skill of having difficult, hard professional conversations and being willing and able to talk about hard things in a professional way, where you're not attacking someone as a human. You're just saying like, hey, this is a problem. We got to figure this out. Her back hurts, or she's having a mental block, or she's having a problem with the friends on the team, or bullying her. If you can't have those conversations professionally, it goes up in smoke so fast, because I can promise you from my years of experience working with many, many athletes low to high level that goals change, feelings change, problems come up inevitably. And if you don't have that bedrock of trust and of communication, problems grow exponentially because people willfully look the other way. They blow up in your face when 2 years go by and the athlete says, well, I actually hate gymnastics and I resent it and I don't want to be here and this is miserable. Or someone says, I love gymnastics, it's amazing, but I also love soccer. I also love school. I also love my friends, and I'm just not feeling this level of commitment anymore. I'd like to move on. And you as a coach or a parent, like, whoa, where did that come from? We weren't ready for that, right? And so you have to have like fluid, open, honest, radical candor and communication to be successful.
Yeah. I want to make the transition to talking about nutrition. And
Yep.
I think one part that a lot of coaches neglect is, again, they don't have the education. So what do? They pass on what they think is right.
Mhm.
But the other part is a lot of the nutrition is going to be taking place at home. So I
Right.
think even getting the parents involved on proper nutrition, a lot of the girls that come in with their snacks that are just like fruit roll-ups or, the little, what are they, goldfish crackers, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's not really going to do anything for you. But the parents probably don't know that, and neither do the kids. So I think having that conversation is going to be helpful from not just like a performance level, but also just from, like, again, injury prevention. Like, if you are only giving your kids a bunch of carbs and fats and they're neglecting protein, like, we're not going to be able to build that muscle tissue. So making sure that their diet is well rounded and not making it about eating as little as possible or calorie restriction. Like, we should always be talking to children from a place of food as fuel, food as nourishment.
Yep.
And having that conversation with them, I think, is very, very important and neglected.
Yeah, there's so many pieces to it here that are really important and to unpack, right? So one is I'm not a nutritionist. I'm just really lucky that I have friends that are phenomenal. So people like Christina Anderson, Carrie Blair, Josh Eldridge, these people are not only are they experts in nutrition, they literally work with, they're medical professionals who are board certified in working with eating disorders and stuff. So what they tell me for advice is what I translate. And if everyone needs help, I just pass them along the road because it's not for me. But that said, yeah, there's a lot of really important things you said there. So one is that how we frame fuel for kids is really important. Like you said, this is about fueling for performance. This is about giving our body energy so that we can go do the fun things that we want to do. We always talk about food or fueling or water or everything in a bucket of how do we treat ourselves well and develop the most as we possibly can. So the first starting point is that you have to make sure that nutrition, water, sleep, recovery is all talked about openly and proactively as a positive thing. And it's not something that you only bring up when, there's a problem or someone's going through something that's challenging, right? So at the gym that I worked at, we tried to always make it just a regular part of the conversation. Like, guys, we have a hard training week coming up and the meet's next weekend. So let's try to make sure we really plan our calendar. We get our homework from our teachers. We get some good ways to sleep to the nights before. We're trying to always have that water bottle with us. And let's plan some snacks. Let's make sure we fuel ourselves well for the week leading up to the meet. And let's also make sure that in here, we're communicating about how we feel and what we're nervous about, right? And we'll try to make sure we're on top of that. So I snuck in there the fuel is performance thing as a not big deal, right? And versus the very damaging way to do that is, guys, we have a meet coming up next week. Let's try to really make sure we're tight about our nutrition. We want to be nice and lean. We want to have these long muscles. We want to make sure we're light and we're airy and we're bouncy. Like, that immediately puts in someone's mind, oh, I have to eat less. And oh, I have to not, weigh too much. And oh, I'm scared of the number on the scale, right? You may not be malicious with your intent because you just see other people doing that in the gymnastics community, but that turns it from an abundance fuel is fuel to a scarcity, oh my God, restrict mindset. And then you start to put people down. The other horrific thing you can do is say, well, let's see how well Susie's jumping and running. Susie's got really long, nice lines and she's really controlling herself well. Let's be careful about that cake when you go to your friend's birthday party so we can all look like Susie. Like, if I could jump into my own skin and crawl out, that would be a way to do it, because I would feel terrible if that ever came out of my mouth, right? So again, I think 95% of people in gymnastics, but also all sports, right? Ballet, dance, cheerleading, anything aesthetic sports where you're, God, I'm so grateful and I'm so appreciative for amazing females in my life who can help have these conversations. But if I was a 12-year-old going through puberty and I had to wear a freaking leotard when I was going through gymnastics, I would be so anxious all the time, right? So
Yeah.
I'm lucky that these females in my life are phenomenal and they can help have that conversation. But think about the doom spiral mentally that happens in a young female gymnast's life and their mind when you leave practice and your coach says that you have to look like Susie and you have to make sure that you're long and lean. Like that girl goes home and goes into a toxic doom spiral of mental health and mental thoughts because they're constantly worried about like, oh, I can't drink water because I'm going to gain weight. I get the scale, blah, 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 and all that. And so you have to find the way to understand how to flip that over to, like I said, fuel is performance. Let's put this in a holistic recovery of that. We want to train hard. We want to compete well. We want to show off all our hard work. We need fuel to do that. And it goes back to the conversation you talked on, which is a well-balanced, properly, timed eating throughout the day. And there's nothing wrong with what Christina and Carrie call fun foods, right? Like I love nachos. On a Saturday night, I eat a plate of nachos and I feel amazing, right? Would I do that before I go for a run? Probably not. I feel terrible. So it's about a time and a place for those fun foods and all that kind of stuff. You build that into the narrative, but it's also about making sure you're constantly trying to encourage people to get educated and to learn what's the best. And it goes back to what you said is like the old school mentality in a lot of places, from like Shape Up magazine, which a lot of coaches maybe got exposed to, and they think is best advice, which is like only protein, no carbs at all, ever, right? And you're like, okay, well, why are you saying that? It's like, well, carbs are going to make you fat. It's like, all right, well, what's the science behind that? Like, can you please explain that to me? Like, well, it's just, I read it and carbs make you fat. So don't eat that. And then, don't eat fat because that's going to make you fat. So let's just go chicken breast all the time only, right? And veggies. And then someone just completely implodes, because then you compare, this is something that I like, the biggest facepalm moment ever was reading the science and physiology of like anaerobic lactate workouts and what it takes to do gymnastics. And I looked at like the fueling of energy systems and the NAD system, the PCR system. I was like, oh my God, like glycolysis, like what have we done? Like, what are we doing to these kids? Well, I've heard some horror stories of people who say, we got to get in shape for the meet. We got to get ready to go. So I want them to come in and do an hour of cardio before we do practice. So you plummet their glycogen stores, and then you ask them to go do floor routines and they land on their face, right? And they don't understand that. And the thing that sometimes happens, which is terrible, is that gets flipped on the athlete. Like, well, you're just not tough enough. You're just not working hard enough. Clearly you're not restricted. Like you're not, on top of your nutrition because you don't have energy right now. It's like, well, maybe the 60 minutes of cardio and the brutal workout is the thing that's the issue here. So I'm not pointing fingers. Like I said, I've made mistakes, thankfully not to that caliber, but a lot of mistakes in education that I haven't gotten back. But that again, that narrative of carbs are bad and don't eat carbs, but that is literally the fuel of gymnastics. And also that's what fuels your brain. Like your nervous system runs off carbs and fats. So it's important to have a high quality, balance there. And then lastly, like you were saying before, is you have to make sure that you have communication for the right people to say these messages well, right? I don't care how smart I am and how much they like me. If I, as a male, talk to a woman about what they're eating as a child, it's going to go terribly. It's going to go terribly. If somebody asks me, of course, I'll give them some advice. But 99% of the time, when somebody has an issue, whether it's about food, it's about my leotard doesn't fit, it's about a period, it's about a women's health issue beyond that, I'm like, Eva, my girl, Eva, Mel, please God help Heather. So I don't like dodge the question and run away. I'm not afraid of that. But at the same time, I'm like, I think it's more appropriate if you have a conversation with your parents about this. And if you want Eva's help as well, or Mel's help or Heather's help, they've gone through this. They can be more empathetic to your situation. There's plenty of other things that I can help you with. I'll be here and listen, but it's probably not appropriate for me to be the person here. One, from a dynamics of coaching, but two, because I'm not a young female who's gone through puberty when I was wearing a leotard and I was having my period. Like, I just don't know how to help you out with that. So yeah.
I feel like the whole identifying athletes based off of body composition is very toxic too, because there are athletes, I mean, we can see this walking down the street, everybody is built differently. So we should start identifying athletes based on their character and not just how their body looks, because that can cause a lot of women to spiral. I was someone who was like 14 and developed an eating disorder. And I was still doing gymnastics at the time. And the words of, you look lean, you look graceful, almost was adding fuel to the fire of like, oh shoot, I have to maintain this because like I'm the pretty dancer type of gymnast and I can't be powerful. And that was a great point too, of the conditioning of like expecting these girls to do conditioning circuits and then let's do a full practice. A lot of the structuring of gymnastics workouts don't make sense. And sometimes coaches get mad at how practice went the day before. So what do? They punish them with conditioning at the beginning of the workout and then they do their training, and then they get mad at them when their performance is bad. It's like you've
Mhm.
already pre-exhausted this person and they're already like in a bad headspace because you're obviously angry, because they can make the correlation. You know, kids aren't dumb, teenagers aren't dumb. They can see this is what you're using as punishment. So of course they're not going to perform well because you put so much pressure on them mentally, but also the pressure of like exhausting their body.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point. This comes back to like education and why understanding the science and the physiology of strength conditioning is so important, because like there's a time and a place if you understand what you're doing, like warming up and doing some basics and shaping and like gymnastics, like general light conditioning, and then doing some
Yeah.
like explosive plyometrics. So the CNS is really ramped up for like 5 to 10 minutes. Completely normal, very accepted in the strength conditioning literature, and very understandable why you would do that. But 95% of people, when you ask them, why are you doing this exercise now? Or why are you doing these? There's not really a good physiological underpinning for why they, even a rationale for why they're doing that. That is a very different, calculated, intelligent way to frame your practice versus we're doing an hour of all this really, really hard conditioning because we want to develop mental toughness and then go do our bar routines. Like that is a completely different, there's not a lot of physiological rationale for that. And I think it's
Mhm.
important for people to be educated on that. But then also, like you said, is I think it's important to realize, like you mentioned, is that sometimes, again, people aren't malicious. They're trying to be encouraging and positive, but there's actually danger in positive comments too, because that implies that at one point you weren't X standard or X this, right? When you say someone,
Mhm.
hey, you're looking lean right now, or like, hey, you're looking really, really, thin right now, you crush somebody because they go, oh, well, if I'm thin now, I must have been fat then, right? Like you
Correct.
crush
Yeah.
somebody for that, right? And I think, again, what it comes down to is not only is the talk about nutrition about fueling for performance, the comments you make are about effort and performance and objective outcome measures of strength and power and explosiveness. So when I want to encourage the kids. I want them to work hard. I want them to be praised for their positive effort. I get that. But what I'm saying is like, man, you are like tumbling through the roof today. Like you look amazing. Like your power is coming along so well. You are gunning it. Your vaults look incredible today. Like I don't know what you're doing, but like if you're getting sleep more, what you're doing, but like it's working, right? Your vaults are huge. You doubled your number of chin ups you can do. Like you look like you're really like fired up and ready to be here. But also you correlate their energy levels and their ability to train hard with their choices, right? So you say like, hey, if you want to crush that meet next Saturday or in 2 months or whatever else is, let's do all the little things we can do now to be really, really good, right? So that means let's try to get 5 of these turns on. Let's do really, really good strength conditioning. Let's try to really put our effort on these sled pushes. I know they're hard, but they're going to pay off. And so if we want that energy, we want the ability to get through hard training programs. Let's try to make sure we're doing all the things out the gym we can do. Let's plan our schedule. Let's make sure we sleep enough. Let's get some water. Let's make sure we get our snacks prepared. Let's talk to our parents about what we're going to eat the night before the meet because we want to have a nice fueled up performance for the next day. So you start to change the narrative around, again, that restrictive fear-based mentality to what are your goals? You want to do well at this meet. You want to learn this suit. You want to jump in the foam pit for 40 more years because it's fun. Well, if those are your goals, I can help you get to those goals by doing these things, which is training hard, sleeping, all that kind of stuff. So you have to be educated on the higher level science of what you're trying to imply. But then again, back to that dual academic and mentorship, you have to develop the soft skills by talking with experts about how you deliver that message well. And I also really want to talk about this because I just don't want to forget about it, is that this is so common in the male side of the sport as well, like incredibly well. Your dog is so cute, by the way. I can't even focus. Um, uh, you have to make sure that the male equivalent of this is also dealt with, because there's so much disordered eating. Myself, and I can tell my story about what I went through because of the super shredded, super jacked
Oh my
mentality that
gosh,
is
yeah.
a bigger narrative of male alpha culture in marketing and I'm trying really hard not to swear, but really
It
garbage
is explicit, so you can.
yeah, absolutely bullshit things of standards of beauty in society, whether it's women's or men's. Those trickle into sports culture, and it very much becomes a problem. And so yeah, a lot of things are unpacked there, but I want to mention the male thing because it's I want to make sure we come back to that topic.
Men totally struggle too. So like nowadays I compete in bodybuilding competitions, and the amount of disordered eating and body
Oh my
thoughts
God,
in men,
laxatives, diuretics. I know that culture. Yeah.
it's huge. And I've always gone more of a science-based approach. I don't go that route, but it's still really toxic in that culture. And it's upsetting to see so many men put so much pressure on themselves. but then they also feel like they can't talk about it because it's too feminine. Like I should be tough. Like I shouldn't be dealing with these struggles. And I feel like a lot more like women are outspoken about it. I mean, I've had 8-year-olds touch their belly and say like, oh, like I don't like this. And now that I have the awareness, I'm able to replace it with something positive. Um, it's usually the comparison too, but I couldn't even imagine what it would be like to be an athlete nowadays and have social media. Luckily, the culture of the sport is changing in a positive direction, I would say. But now we're, as coaches, like have to be aware of the social media pressure that so many young people and older people are dealing with.
Yeah, I run a business that's based on social media marketing, so I understand this. But this is where I think, as parents, adults, people, we have to teach kids how to use technology and as a tool and not as a vice, right? So like social media can be an amazing thing and it can be really great and really inspiring if you have control over what you're doing. So follow the people who are inspiring, not those, trash Insta models who are in bikinis just showing the newest juice cleanse, right? Like that's one thing to think about. But also two is that if you can teach the athlete, one, that social media is a tool that has pros and cons, but two, if you can teach them to see through the reality of social media, which is that social media is just exposing people's underlying characteristics. So when Susie 44 in the comments says you're fat and you're ugly, Susie 44 is desperately seeking help in her life. Because think about what mentally place she is in to go into somebody else's comments and just trash somebody. And anybody who follows Gary Vee knows that I'm a big fan of Gary, and I got this from him.
I just had this happen to me the other day. I had a 60-year-old
Exactly.
woman doing this to me.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll give an example here because I think she's public about it. And I've talked on the podcast. One of my really, really dear friends, Tasha Persevich, was a super high level CrossFit. She's won the CrossFit games with Rich Froning and some other people. And she chronically faces just trash in the comment section. You look like a man. Look at those blah, blah, blah. She's beautiful. She's beautiful. She's an amazing human. And she is a perfect example of someone who geared her body towards a competitive performance outcomes. It's fucking hard to win the CrossFit games, bro. Like it is so hard. So she dedicated her life. She was a very high level gymnast for a long time before she did CrossFit. And so, but she still faces tons and tons of people in the comment section just completely trashing on her. And I text her sometimes. I'm like, man, just try to, I know it hurts. I know it sucks. And she's amazing now, but we're dealing with it. But like, think about the emotional landscape of somebody who's in the comment section on your thing, goes out of their way to say you look like a man or you're too bulky, blah blah. Think about how awful that person's life is. Like they must be in such a bad place to do that. So deploying empathy can be a good way to deal with some of those things. But that being said, you don't have to use social media. You don't have to use social media. You don't need it to be successful. You don't have to give a personal social media. I haven't used my own personal social media for probably 5 years out of choice around mental health stuff, but also productivity. I have following for business stuff, but I'm trying to promote good ecosystem, good vibes. And it's up to you as a parent, as a coach, as a medical provider to make sure you teach athletes about that. And I actually spend a ridiculous amount of time with the athletes when I was coaching about what is the underpinning of social media? What is going on? Why are your friends posting 40 times with a filter in the perfect light in their new outfit? They're desperate for attention and validation because if you have empathy, you can look beyond that and say they're insecure. They have the same fears that you do. They want to be liked by people. They want to have friends. They want to be, feeling good about themselves. Their fears and insecurities surface as I need to take this picture with this filter in this prom dress so that the cute boy thinks I'm attractive or this cute girl thinks I'm attractive and they're going to want to go to prom with me or they're going to say how cute I look, right? Like I try to go layers deeper on myself through what I've learned with my own body image disorders and stuff like that in therapy is that like, if you can unpack that you never have to be dependent on someone for your self-esteem or your happiness or your motivation, and you have to find ways to cope with emotional discomfort and find ways to deal with your own problems productively with non, unhealthy coping mechanisms, you can build yourself up to be walled against some of that criticism. So I try, not as a therapist, but as someone who's gone through this, and I have friends who are therapists who help, saying like, let's teach these athletes how to build their own self-esteem and their own self-confidence and their own positive self-talk and their own level of motivation for their own goals intrinsically, because that can wall them against these Sarah 44s and Johnny Pants 86s who just have no better time because they're insecure and they're fearful and they're not happy with their own self-esteem or personal life to just go ahead and start trashing everybody else. So I found that when I worked on that on myself, I became a better positive role model for other people that that wasn't the goal. I don't want to be a guru or a mentor or a positive role model, whatever you want to say. That's not my goal, but I'm trying to live a happier life and be healthier. And if that as a bilateral effect on other people is good, that's awesome. But then they realize that they're like, oh, this is about me being happy with my own life and my own body and my own choices and my own self-esteem. That gives them protection against social media. And one more thing I want to talk to is what you came back to is how important the role of the parent is in food and in nutrition at home life, because they don't buy groceries. Kids aren't at Whole Foods and Stop and Shop buying food, right? Like that's where it comes down to. It's hard sometimes because when you start to talk about cultural issues in gymnastics with eating disorders and strength conditioning, all this kind of stuff, you start digging deeper cuts at the people and their own fears and their own insecurities about why is a 40-year-old girl or a guy coach yelling at an 8-year-old because she's not making her beam series, right? Is that really about, a bigger goal of gymnastics, or is that about some serious deep-seated problems that they're struggling with? Same thing with food, right? I've worked with some really high-level elite gymnasts who couldn't quite get over that hump of really feeling as though their nutritional profile was where they wanted to be because the family just still consistently ate really crappy food, and they had the money to afford good food, but they were stuck in their own vices of using food to cope with their emotional pain or not being able to break their own cycles of wanting to change their habits. And so the athlete is in the gym doing everything they can. They come home and they're stuck in an environment where it's so challenging to change and go uphill because of the stigma of having a really well-balanced, healthy meal after fuel when everyone else is eating pizza 5 days a week, right? And so I think that's really important too for anyone listening who's a parent, a medical provider, a coach, is you have to be willing and able to stare your own demons in the eyes a little bit and deal with your own problems and become a little bit better there. You're not going to be perfect. I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. But the best thing you can give a kid is a positive example to follow, right? And your actions speak way louder than your words. So if you say, I care about my health and I want to take care of myself as a parent to help the family or help whoever, and then you sleep 5 hours because you work too much and you eat like total crap, and then you don't work out, and then you're not taking care of your own emotional stuff, what kind of an example does that set for the kid? So a lot of these things really do come from your own accountability. And I've had to crawl uphill through the mud to deal with my own stuff before I could ever give advice or positions or feel like I'm in a position to maybe influence other people's ideas.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it takes a village. It takes a village to get an athlete to a really high level. I do feel like all of the stars have to align in a way, and it can be hard to get the parents on board. There's plenty of times where I've been working with extremely talented children, and then they go to their parents and they're basically saying, like, you're still not good enough. That wasn't good enough. And you can see it eat them away. And nothing is more disappointing than seeing a poor little 9-year-old girl crying after an amazing performance on my end. So I think that there's a lot of communication that everybody has to be having. And it's so funny too. We go back to like old school gymnastics culture. What was that like? Parents don't talk, don't say anything. You can't come to practice, you can't come watch. So what happens is no one's on the same page. No one has any idea what's going on. So it is great that it is changing to where parents can be a part of that conversation because they should be, that's their child. But we all have to make sure that it's in the kid's best interest as well, because a lot of coaches are spending more time with the kids one-on-one than a lot of these parents are.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to realize here, if I put my coaching hat on, it is very important that there are boundaries and that there are, not rules, but just guidelines for communication. Like I know as a coach, the nightmare of having a parent literally yelling from the stands to change
Yeah.
or what's the judging doing, like that stuff is very inappropriate. And not only is it stressful for the coach and for the gymnast, it's extremely unsafe. It's very, very unsafe to have somebody yelling from the stands or giving input when you're trying to do something that you're really, really risky on. So I think it's with that caveat that you have to have, this is how we communicate about problems, and you're welcome to watch anytime, but you definitely can't come on the floor and start coaching or giving critique or feedback, right? Like, this is why you hired me, to coach your son or daughter. So that being said, I think, yeah, it gets to a situation where really those problems that developed around, you can't come to the gym, and let's be honest, you can't come to the National Training Center, you can't come to the ranch and watch your kids do it, you can't come to this gym, you can't ever come to practice, drop off at the door, leave, walk out, we're not going to even talk, right? That is about control. That is about control, and that is about wanting to manipulate everything that's going on and have psychological warfare over the parents and condition them. And a lot of people even call that like psychological grooming towards abuse, is you're conditioning someone to don't speak up, never talk about it. This is me, blah, blah, blah. Don't, how you dare question me. I'm a national team coach. How dare you question me? I run this gym, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be able to see that for what it is, which is inappropriate. And it's the foundation for an absolute volcano to erupt down the road. So I think it's a tug of war here, because if you're doing this well, and if you have a gym that has good humans and they care about the environment, and they're also showing that their goals are develop health first, then great humans second, then great gymnast third, there shouldn't be anything to hide. There shouldn't be a reason why you can't talk about something. And if you have that radical candor and professional trust, and it's built on a really good bedrock, we both want to help your kid reach their goal. It's not weird to talk about, okay, well, I don't want you to come to practice at 5:30 when I'm trying to come on the floor and try to have a conversation with me, because I have to go run practice, and that is really stressful. And I'm trying to set the stations up. I'm trying to give your kid a good experience. So if you come in the door at 5:28 and drop your daughter off and then pull me aside and start talking to me about all these things we have to do, it's going to completely throw off the vibe here. So instead, I'll hear your concern, I'll voice your concern, but email me right now. We'll find a meeting. You can come in 15 minutes early. I'll know I have time to talk to you. We can have a fluid conversation. It's communication points like that. But then also on the side of, there are some times when, as a coach or as a person trying to lead a rotation, you're like, listen, I'm trying to teach them something very technically challenging and something very scary and very, very risky. And so we can't afford to have you in the stands watching every single move, and because the athlete is distracted. So you're more than welcome to come. I want you to be here. I want you to learn everything. But maybe if we're learning a giant for the first time and they're already really highly stressed out and I'm trying to focus with them, maybe it's not the best time for you to sit there for 60 minutes and watch every single move. Maybe we can find a way where you can watch after we get the scale, but please give me these 60 minutes, because we're really doing something challenging here. And so there's communication points there. We're like, I want you to be here all the time. I want you to talk about everything. I will never not answer any question you have, comma, there are some times when it's really important from a safety point of view to make sure we are keeping the athlete focused on what they're doing. So there's caveats here, all the way from the boundaries. Don't text me, don't Facebook message me at 2:00, please, in the afternoon, or 2 a.m, to don't yell in the stands, to there are times when we're here to do business and we have some important stuff to do.
Yeah, definitely. Dave, what is one thing that you're really excited about, maybe in the gymnastics space or anything research related that
Yes.
you're currently doing?
Yeah. So we have 2 projects going on right now. I do want to make sure that. So we're seeing 2 things happen. One is we're seeing a lot more on the medical side, which is not for the coaching or parents to deal with. In the medical side, we're seeing a better unification of gymnastic sports medicine. So my bosses did an amazing job with baseball. They worked with great surgeons who developed the surgeries for Tommy John, and then they would develop the rehab protocols, and then the strength and conditioning coaches would help. And there'd be this really long, nice, smooth progression for how to get back after you tear your UCL, for example. And thankfully, because of Mike and Lenny, because of my experiences, because of the people that I've worked with in Boston, I have great surgeons around me. I'm starting to do projects like that where, elbow OCD, for example, we're publishing a paper right now on, okay, say you get OCD in your elbow, which is a cartilage issue. From the moment you start to have pain to the moment you are fully back to gymnastics a year later, what does that entire process look like, right? How can we get that entire thing to go down so that the average, medical provider in the middle of Iowa can look up this protocol on PubMed and be like, oh, I don't know anything about gymnastics, but this seems pretty good. Like, I'll follow this because we have everything together. It's consensus papers. So that's really exciting, because we need that for like back pain, ACL stuff, OCD. We could be perfect with our culture and everything. Injuries are still going to happen. And if someone gets kind of caught up in the medical mill of not having great information and rehab, it's really challenging to get back. So I'm excited about that. I'm really excited about the strength and conditioning transition that we're seeing, because again, that's a huge way to increase performance, reduce risk. And then the bigger thing that I'm involved in now is developing those workload and those wellness monitoring programs. I believe that proper workload stuff, the education, the cultural guidelines, and all that, those things together will make a notable impact on what I feel is more important, which is like athlete mental health and emotional distress first. And then it will also carry over to much better performance. So yeah, we have a study going now with a couple college teams that we're doing like a feasibility study or a proof of work study. So I designed the system over 5 years, and I've been working really hard on it. And it's essentially field testing it to say, like, would this work? And would this show us reliably what we think it's going to show us? And so that is proving to be good right now. It's linked to Achilles tears, which is a whole different ball of wax, but that's exciting to see that happen, because if this one works, we can get a bigger grant approved and try to do a larger scale study and start seeing like, okay, here's a Excel spreadsheet that coaches can use to put in the information, and it pumps out reports and that kind of stuff. So yeah, those are, I have my hands a lot of different places, but that's kind of the bigger ones right now.
Yeah, first person I thought of with the elbow was Morgan.
Yeah.
Yeah, countless surgeries there. But yeah, I've been loving your work here. And guys, I'm going to leave Dave's information down below. So if you're wanting to go check out his Instagram, I believe you have a YouTube as well. He's got lots of great content there. And thank you again for your time today.
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. I'm happy to help.